For so long, you convince yourself that, you can't, that this wouldn't happen without me. We can't do, like, I need to do. And really, you just need to, get out of the way and trust your people.
I imagine it can be both ego deflating in the sense that, hey, they can do this without me, and maybe they did it better without me, but also incredible feeling, liberating. If you're not around and all this stuff happened, you go on vacation, you come back, and all these things have happened, and you're like, damn, that's awesome.
It certainly frees you up, right, to do the things that, I've mentioned it before, like finding what your highest value add is, right? I know that other people can do things much better than I can in, it's like 90% of the professional space. There are certain things that I'm pretty darn good at, and now I get to focus on them. So that ultimately, reaps dividends for the firm at that level. So, and we're also blessed because, we've had enough success to be able to bring on these people, right? If we were strapped or if we were on a baseline, it'd be difficult to take that revenue and invest back in people. But for now, it's a clear decision for us.
Welcome to the Founding Partner Podcast. Join your host, Jonathan Hawkins, as we explore the fascinating stories of successful law firm founders. We'll uncover their beginnings, triumph over challenges, and practice growth. Whether you aspire to launch your own firm, have an entrepreneurial spirit, or are just curious about the legal business, you're in the right place. Let's dive in.
Welcome to Founding Partner Podcast. I'm your host, Jonathan Hawkins. This is a podcast where I get to interview law firm leaders and learn about their journeys and lessons learned along the way. So hopefully I can maybe avoid mistakes that I'd otherwise make and maybe accelerate my growth. And hopefully you, the audience member, can do the same. So excited about today's guest. We've got Dan Purtell of McElldrew Purtell, which is a personal injury firm based in Philadelphia. I recently met Dan and was immediately impressed with some of the stuff he's got going on. And I said, I got to get him on and talk about what he's doing and what he sees in the future of personal injury law, particularly, but also just law firms in general with some of the movement we've seen with outside ownership, et cetera, et cetera. So, Dan, welcome to the show. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your firm, how many folks you got, where you're located, where you're moving, and then we'll dive in.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for the platform. I think it's a very important space, and you're doing good work here. And thank you for having me. I appreciate it. As you said, I'm with McElldrew Purtell. We're based out of Philadelphia. We do have a national practice depending on subject type, but we do catastrophic complex cases. We've had quite a bit of growth recently. I think we're right at the 60 person mark overall with about 20 lawyers practicing across medical malpractice, nursing, trucking, commercial vehicle, toxic torque products, civil rights. I don't want to miss any because somebody's going to get mad at me. We do a cargo practice, which is primarily cargo securement, collapse, forklift, transition, that type of case. We have the civil rights, wrongful conviction, and excessive force case. Pretty much any catastrophic, complex topic, we have a team of lawyers that has a background in that subtype.
So would you call yourself a trial firm or more high volume or some sort of blend of that?
Certainly a trial firm. We prep every case from the beginning for trial. Lower volume side, that's kind of a relative question, right? High volumes, some volumes high for some people, low for others. I think we have right in the area of 450 or 500 files right now. But with 20 lawyers, you can see the kind of file density we look for. We don't want people overworked. We want people to be able to work deep and to do the best work as fast as early in the case as possible and really maximize value. So we try to maintain a really manageable file load for everybody. And that's why we're growing so much, because we're fortunate enough to keep getting cases.
Yeah, it's interesting. I see, particularly on the personal injury side, firms that grow really fast, they sort of fall into, one of the buckets, and this is just generalization, but it seems like the ones that are growing really fast advertise, and they have a lot of volume of cases and they need a lot of lawyers. But you're growing fast, but you're not doing that, or you're doing very little of that. It's more, like you said, the deeper work, the bigger cases, the trial work.
Yeah, we don't advertise per se. We work with a lot of people who are very good at advertising, who have a wide imprint on advertising. We're fortunate enough that we've developed relationships with a lot of folks who do aggregate cases. And when they think a case is good for us, we're here. We're largely referral based. We do have, I'd say probably 70-30. I'd love to kind of split that mix a little more, but we are heavily B2B or referral based law firm.
Well, we're going to dive into more of that, but I want to go back. We're going to go back. So, the other thing that I've seen a lot with personal injury lawyers is many of them started on the defense side, then made the switch at some point. Very few go straight to plaintiff's work straight out of law school, although there are some. Where do you fall in that?
I'm a true believer. I'll never do defense work a day in my life. So I came straight to the personal injury side. I had a rocky start getting started. It's not an easy path, right? I wouldn't recommend it necessarily. I actually think there are smarter ways to get to where I am than the path that I chose. But I truly do believe that what we do is a calling. I never had any interest in doing any other type of law. This is where I kind of found myself pretty quickly. And while I caution young lawyers on the same path, I think it's very rewarding and doable if you have the right mentality and then you're kind of aligned in why you're doing it.
I asked because, I went to law school wanting to be a plaintiff's trial lawyer. Okay. And I tried the heck out of getting a job straight out of there. I mean, I was cold, and back then, you had the hardbound Martindale books back then. So I'm sending letters to every personal injury firm I could find in the state of Georgia, and nobody would hire me. Because the model is, they liked you to go get a little training on the defense side first, not too much, because it's hard to break that mentality, but they want you to get a little bit. So yeah, I mean, I know how hard it was. I didn't do it, so I know how hard it is. So kudos to you for sticking with it and finding that path, because it's not easy.
No, it's not. I mean, to your point, I remember being in the law library and sending out 70 letters to every firm I could find and not getting a single response. And I was fortunate enough to clerk with a high quality firm throughout law school, and I started there. My friends will joke. I mean, I bounced around a little bit my first couple years, had some ups, had some downs. Was actually initially let go by my mentor Jim McEldrew, and then brought back to the firm. So there are some fits and starts in this path, but I wouldn't have changed it for the world. I've learned so much. When you kind of start at the bottom, you understand I've worked every job in the firm, from marketing through intake, from signups to medical records to discovery and pleadings. I've done it all. I've done it all a lot, and I think that really helps when we're trying to build a system here. So it's, like I said, it was a rough road for a while, but I wouldn't change it.
Yeah. So let's dig in and talk a little bit. We'll start with sort of marketing. We've sort of touched on it a little bit, but in the PI space, we've talked about it, that you have some that do a lot of traditional advertising, billboard, TV, radio. Then you've got a lot of people that pursue on the digital side. Then you've got some that are, I call really low volume, referral based, just trial firms. And you probably lean more towards that. How did you guys find, what works for you? And you don't have to give away the secret sauce, but in terms of getting the cases to fuel this growth that you've had?
Sure. We're traditionally, where our background was in medical malpractice, kind of a grab bag of PI, and really one of our bread and butter practices, which is our railroad FELA practice. And so we kind of had a three-headed team there, none of which was marketed at all. It was all client base and relationships. Over the years, we have really tried to lean into what I refer to as B2B marketing. So, my clients are twofold. Of course, the individuals and their families that we represent, but it's also the attorneys that I work with that do their own marketing, that have their own firm, they have their own client base. They're the ones that see the cases, see the volume of work. And when, my job is really to communicate with them, let them know what cases, we think we're really positioned well to maximize, and, to back it up when we get a file. So over the years, what we've really done is kind of focused on our outreach, focused on our B2B marketing. I'm not going to say that we don't have some small-sided SEO stuff that we do, that attempting to get a case here and there. But really what we do is we work with other law firms. So that's you can't get away from legal marketing these days, whether good or bad, right? the billboards, the TV commercials. We work with most of those people. They're great at what they do. They have it down to a science. They're so good at what their marketing and their tech space that it's impressive. And we're fortunate enough to work with them. Also, we have hundreds of small firms that send us, 1 to 2 cases a year. So we really do run the gamut. And that's what we pride ourselves on. We have a full intake team now. A great attorney in her own right, Carrie Capoulier, leads our intake team. She's got a staff of 4 or 5. So we're really there to get geared up fast. And we have a pre-lit team, another 10 people that their job is to build the case. So we really do try to live to what we put ourselves out as, which is a firm that really gets at the file from first day. We don't sit back. We don't wait on the statute. We are really there to attack the file. If we're going to take it, we're going to take it and go. And we finally have the people and the systems and the teams to really make that work.
Well, I'll tell you, the firms that attack the file usually get the bigger numbers, the bigger results from my experience. So take me through sort of the evolution of the firm. Again, we recently met, so I've not seen the growth, but my sense is that you guys have grown a lot and that you're looking to grow more. And I'm just curious sort of the path that's taken.
At the beginning, it was a small firm. Jim McEldrew, my mentor, great friend, former partner and boss, he started everything. There was times where it was 5 of us, right? We were a true small firm where everybody was on task for whatever needed to happen that day. There was an all hands on deck mentality, and that served us well with the size and scope that we had. Over time, we started getting more and more complex cases, larger cases. You asked earlier what was, kind of one of the keys in our trajectory, and I would say it was starting to really define what it is that we did take. It's really hard if you're a referral attorney to turn down a case. It's kind of scary to start doing it. And I know other people in our space have talked about it, and I think they've probably done a better job than I will, but I'm a big proponent of it. You really need to stick to the cases that you are really designed to take. And, I think Joe Freed, probably a lot of people know him. He said something along the lines that a case needs to be a priority for its attorney. So if we're taking a case and it's not a priority for our attorneys, then we're taking the wrong case. So it's, the client deserves to have their case be a priority. So if it's a case that doesn't fit our space, we have to be able to say no. And we started doing that. And for counterintuitively, the cases that we did want started skyrocketing. We started getting more and more of the cases where we wanted them. So it worked. We've grown real fast. We were growing into COVID. And I think we really learned that, the remote workplace works, that the national practice works, that we can do sophisticated teamwork. And we started building out. We started adding attorneys. We started adding staff. We started adding professional operations teams. And it's been a wild ride to where we are now.
So you mentioned there about turning down cases, and I get it, man. That's scary stuff. Because
really
especially when you have a referral-based firm, you start turning them away. You're like, they're not going to call me next time. And so
my business is going to go to the next guy, or any number of ways you can lose that account, lose that relationship. And it's a scary proposition to get started.
So how did you break through that mindset shift? Because, I have broken through a number of those in my journey. I think everybody does. And that's a big one. So how did you break through it?
Honestly, I probably heard somebody on a podcast say something smart about doing it, and I stuck to it. I've been a big proponent of this space, the attorney education space, whether it be books or podcasts. And I don't pretend to be a masterful creator, right? Most of the things that I've done over time have been adoptions for other people. And, it always kind of struck me as something like, why are we taking certain cases? And the concept was always, the small case leads to the big ones. But from my view on the front lines, the small case takes just as much time as the big ones. It takes just as much energy. You can get just as much trouble, right? The trials are just as nerve-wracking. So, it is just as much work in my estimation, or almost just as much work. And there's really, you just got to start doing it. And the first time doing it's tough. And then you start seeing it play out. And now I'm a huge proponent of it. But it's equally difficult trying to get the younger attorneys in the group to understand it, and to, because they're starting off that same path, trying to build those same networks. And it's the same principle over and over again. There's a fear of letting something go because you don't know it's going to come back. And, You got to have a little bit of faith at some level.
Yeah, such great advice there. That mindset, the fear based, and I mean, I feel it. I'm feeling it now in certain parts of my firm, and it's just, you just have to keep the faith and jump. So that's cool. So back to sort of the growth of your firm. You mentioned you started hiring. You hired attorneys, obviously, and you hired staff, but then you've hired some of these higher level, I call them, C-suite or exec level type people. When did you start doing that?
We've really leaned into that, I'd say, over the past 2 years. Started with the idea of it probably 2 to 3 years ago. We now have a head of operations, head of HR, head of marketing. We have you met him earlier because I was having some difficulty with my system. Our head of IT. So we really do have just talented people across the board, which, in a traditional law firm, it was law firms and paralegals, and then you kind of figured out how to do the rest of it. And so we're really trying to turn, quote unquote, the rest of it into a strength of our firm and really lean into those spaces and get as good as we can there. And what we're finding is that translates directly to casework. Because if the lawyers don't have to come off cases to fix the phone lines or to fix the computer or to worry about the printer or whatever it might be, they can really stay dialed into their cases. They can work more with their experts. They can do better exhibits. They can take better depositions. And so really trying to let people focus to their highest purpose and be great at their jobs, it's been working, and it's been translated to our results.
It's interesting you say that. I've heard some other owners say that, you think that hiring more producers, i.e. attorneys or paralegals, will drive the revenue growth, and they certainly do. But he said sort of counterintuitively, some of the biggest drivers of the firm were the hires of the non sort of revenue producers, sort of like you just said, probably for the reasons you just mentioned. Number one, they're focused on doing that job, not worried about the law firm stuff or the client work, and then vice versa. The lawyers aren't distracted doing things that they don't need to be doing. So have you been able to see it? You said you started maybe 2 years ago, and obviously you probably had lower level admin people, but as you started to hire the higher level, more experienced people, have you seen hockey stick or any sort of reflection in the revenue growth?
We have seen considerable, bottom line growth, inventory growth over the past couple of years. I think it's really starting. Believe it or not, I think you mentioned hockey stick. I don't really think that we've made that turn yet. I think we're just getting there. I think we've definitely established, a new normal, I guess you would say, as far as, our caseload, our size, the size of our cases, the revenue. But a lot of the projects that we're doing now, like really trying to structure the operations of our firm. We're building a new Salesforce file management system. We have an AI engineer who's working with that process to design AI products across from end to end to try to optimize the operations. And the key, and you mentioned it earlier about, future growth. We've reached a place now where I think we're almost as big as people-wise, as big as we want to be. Like, in reality, we'll have to get a little bigger, I think. But our goal and our mandate now is to do more, do better with what we have. Because I think one of our strengths is our relationships, is our culture. And I worry about getting too big and kind of losing that. I had the experience the other day when I walked in the office and I didn't know somebody that worked for us. And that was kind of scary for me. So, yeah. So, that was an awkward conversation, and it made me think about it. Like, how much bigger do we really want to get? Because I do think that, to the point of being quick on files, to the point of getting deep on work, like, you need to really know and trust the people you're working with to have that level of expertise and have that level of coordination. So, you get too big, I think you start to lose that.
So I do want to dig into some of the AI stuff in a minute, but that's interesting. So you're now to the point where people are getting hired and you have nothing to do with it.
It's a beautiful thing. Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I think that point of it is a testament to the systems working and to people doing their jobs. That was one of the hardest things, is just coming to grips with letting go, right? Because as a small firm, when we were smaller, Jim and I, we did everything. We had amazing help, right? We had amazing people, that crew, most of which are still with us. They were lifesavers. They would do anything under the sun on a given day. But, the reality was that we had to be involved at every level, every step of the firm. And, changing that mentality, getting away from that mentality, and letting other people just own things and own portions of the process has really freed me up to do a lot of the other stuff, to do the stuff that I think I'm pretty good at. And I think it's freed up other people in the firm to maximize their talents. So I think it really is, it pays dividends once you're able to let go and let other people own parts of the process.
So I want to dig into that, the letting go piece, because I'm sort of going through, I'm at one of those inflection points now. So I want to get your advice. How did you learn to let go? What advice do you have to me or to others out there to begin to let go of the process?
I think if you ask some of the people on our team, they'll say that I need to learn more, right? I mean, I don't think you're ever really completed, but I know that, I've learned a lot by trial and error, right? I've made big mistakes. I think that we should be a couple years further on our timeline if I did a better job as a leader. I know that I've messed up processes by being too involved. Like, I've seen that in real time, and I've seen that in retrospect. So it really comes down to finding good people, great people, and letting them do what they're supposed to be doing. And I still do kind of probably come back in and mix around too much, and I'm trying to even stop that, to really let the pros have ownership over the process. But to your point, how do you do it? I think it's just there comes a point where you can't do everything, right? I mean, you can't work 22 hours a day with kids. There is an opportunity cost to everything, and you can't be a great trial lawyer if you're constantly worried about the minutia of running a firm. Right, you can't develop new business if you're worried about everything under the sun. So you kind of got to realize that you can't do everything, and it's just impossible. So, and then find good people to do it for you, and just hope you make the right choice on the people.
It's interesting, some of the evolution that I've seen. I'm curious your take on it. You learn to delegate tasks. And that can be hard for some lawyers, but you delegate tasks, but you still keep the mental headspace because you got to manage the task. Mm-hmm. But then the more advanced delegation is you also delegate the management and the headspace part of it too. And you just say, you do it all. And that's sort of, I think, a big mindset shift for a lot of attorneys, is letting that piece go.
Agreed. But for me personally, that's been what it was required, right? I mean, I have phenomenal partners, we have phenomenal executive leadership, and it really has freed up just massive bandwidth, to your point, to your terminology, to be able to focus on other things, to be able to focus on the marketing, on the development, on systematizing focus groups, on how to better prepare cases for trial, stuff that I think I'm pretty good at, as opposed to kind of spinning my wheels and trying to learn how to do things that I'm candidly not very good at. There's lots of people. We have a lot of talented people, and they are really good at what they do. And I think it came to us. It was almost a survival decision for me, because I couldn't keep working the way I'd worked for 10, 15 years, and I had to figure out a way to be more effective while doing less. And thankfully, we have the team that we have, and they've just been phenomenal.
So I talked to a lot of owners, and they wanted to move away from the legal work and just become sort of the CEO. And then there's some that want to have people to do all that CEO type work so they can do the cases because they just love trying cases. And then there's others that maybe have some hybrid, or maybe they want to spend time training and mentoring. What is your role now, and what do you want it to be?
I think we're currently kind of reforming my short-term role right now. Like I said, we're doing some pretty long-term development and R&D in our system right now that we hope are some of the drivers that really help carry us forward. We didn't find a file management system that we really thought worked for us, so we're building our own. I also mentioned that we're diving pretty deep into AI, and I think in the short term, my primary job is to make sure that we execute on that. So that's the next year and a half, to make sure that we really do not just design it, but also implement it and adopt it. All of which is to hopefully get me back to doing cases, but we'll see. We when I say we have phenomenal people, that of course means we have great trial lawyers. We have 8, 10 men and women that I would put up against anybody. They can go try complex cases anywhere, and I'm starting to get the feeling that they'll need me. So that's a good thing.
It's sort of depressing too, but so one thing that has struck me is that you really are investing. I mean, you've mentioned a few of the things you're doing that you really are investing in your firm. And back to the hockey stick analogy, a lot of times you got to reinvest, create a new base or foundation upon which you can sort of rocket ship off of. And so it's been really impressive to see some of the investments that you're making. So building your own practice management system, that is huge. That is a huge undertaking and not something I would think that you decided lightly to take on. Take me through your thought process a little bit more on that.
No, it was, we tried and that's probably one of you asked earlier about what I learned, and I mentioned trial by failure, right? We've been trying to properly implement a file management system, since 2015. We tried a couple, maybe we might have failed because we were too impatient or too strapped to really put the time in to do it, right? It's a massive undertaking to one, design it, two, adopt it, three, implement it. And when you don't have time to really breathe in between plays, it's hard to do that. So, I personally, I said, I think my mistakes probably put us a couple years behind. I can personally take responsibility for the last file management system probably not working as well as it should. But what we found after all those trial and errors was that there really wasn't, there's a lot of great systems out there. I'm sure that they work really well for a lot of firms. None of them really work really well for us, right? With the way we have, with the complex cases we work on, with the variety of cases we work on, with the different jurisdictions, we get a lot of experts in early. We like to do a lot of different things with graphics. We like to do a lot of different things with video, with big data files. So we just wanted something that really was customized to how we practice. So, we are, of course, starting with something that's a little bit out of the box, but then customizing it to us and then building different AI tools ingrained in that system, starting from marketing, working all the way through to resolution. So hopefully to collapse down our process as much as possible and give our attorneys and staff every asset and every resource possible to do more, better work, without doing more work.
And so another thing that I've seen both personally on the inside of law firms and just from talking to a lot of lawyers is, I'll call it maybe sort of a short-termism thought process, particularly when you have an older generation of lawyers sort of at the top. They're at the tail end of their career, and they're like, no, we don't want to invest in the firm. We want to just pull more money out of it. And so, but even when they don't have that dynamic necessarily, a lot of lawyers just say, we're going to pull money out. We're not going to reinvest for the future. And it sounds like you're doing a lot of that. So again, sort of take me through, your thought process there. How did you come to that decision versus, hey, I could put more money in my pocket versus, no, let's invest it in the firm because it's going to help the firm grow 5, 10 years from now?
I mean, listen, we all need money. Money, it's why we work at some level. Doing this work has never really been about the money for me. And I think it's frustrated certain people, and over time, it's about the case. It's about doing the case the best it can be. And it's about holding the other side accountable, right? And I don't necessarily mean it. Of course, we measure that as a system in money. I don't really measure it on a case-by-case basis in money. So it's never been really my driving factor, although it's been a result. We're a young firm. I'm about to turn 46 in a couple of days. I don't think there's anybody that's actively practicing in our firm that's over 50. We're here for the long haul. We're trying to build that. I think the industry is going to change a ton in the next 3, 5, 7, 10 years. And I think my main job is to make sure that we create a firm that's ready to compete in that space, so that everybody that's contributed to that space still has the career they want and the opportunities they want going forward. So I'm really committed to building that system that's going to compete and win going forward, which is going to take a lot.
Well, happy birthday, first of all.
Yeah.
Real quick, thanks for listening. If you're getting any value out of this podcast, please take 2 seconds to hit the subscribe button and leave a 5-star review. It would really mean a lot to me. Now back to the show. So let's dive into that. So that's the other thing that struck me when we started talking a number of weeks ago is your foresight and what you see coming down the pike in terms of the legal industry, but even more particular, the personal injury practice area. So what do you see coming? Take me through some of that.
I don't know how much of this is doomsday, and I don't know how much is just intuition or, already obvious to a lot of people. But I think our space is a very attractive industry for a lot of, investing interests. You're already starting to see it with the deregulation out west in Arizona and Utah. I know there's deregulation platforms in multiple state legislatures across the country. I think there's inevitably that is going to proliferate. Our practice is mainly in Pennsylvania. We have a very strong state bar. We've been able to hold off a lot of external interest and keep our civil justice system robust. We're committed to doing that, but I see it as a kind of an inevitable nexus between money, PE, and the turning law into a business. And I think that unfortunately is the trend of the future. And, we're leaning in all avenues to make sure that we're ready for those challenges and that we are prepared to meet them head on.
Yeah, I think it's coming. It's largely, it's here. It's
for
coming.
sure.
It's here.
It's certainly already around, right? I think to use the hockey stick analogy again, right? It's absolutely present. I don't think it's reached the bend in the stick yet. I think the massive, we're seeing the tip of the iceberg, right? To use repeat bad analogies, but it's while it is certainly here, right? There are massive PE interests already funding, case acquisition, funding marketing, funding aggregation. I just think that's just the beginning, right? And if you're not adopting tech, if you're not really moving forward, if you're not modernizing your financing systems, if you're not modernizing your people, if you're really not trying to compete at all levels, it's going to be a tough road in the future.
Yeah, there's lots of changes coming. We've talked about sort of the big money. You've mentioned AI a little bit, so let's talk about that. So, that's another thing that is, you mentioned do more, do better with what you have or with the people you have. And so what are you seeing? What are you trying to do with AI to basically leverage your current people and do more, do better?
Sure. To be clear and start out early, we are not practicing law with AI, right? The one thing that we have not yet authorized or adopted is research and briefing using AI. But I think it's such a force multiplier that it can't be denied. And it's going to become such a huge part of our culture, let alone our business operations across multiple spaces. It would be silly not to try to find ways to adopt it within the legal space. From being able to digest medical records, a project that used to maybe take a top line lawyer 2 weeks, or a litigation nurse, highly talented, highly trained, highly experienced professional, 2-3 weeks. You can get 90% of the way there in a couple hours while you're doing something else. And then, take the work, and then you take your time to deep dive into the records, really understand where you need to be. So you're two birds, one stone in 1/10 of the time. And you start thinking about, bandwidth on files. If you can handle 20 cases on your own, 15, 20 complex cases on your own, what does AI give you? What can you do now? Can you do 25? Can you do 30 just as well? Can you do 30 better, right? With the same amount of time spent in the office? And that just makes for, a better firm, happier lawyers, happier staff. Everybody's rocking and rolling. So, we're really trying to, like I said, we've actually hired an engineer to work with our team to develop different AI products from start to finish. And it's just the possibilities are endless.
I like that sort of the internal proprietary system that will help you. And, I guess you can decide what you do with that later if you let other firms get access to it or not. But definitely
that's why
advantage.
We touched on it earlier. We're very focused on building the business of our firm right now, which means policies, procedures. It means job descriptions. It means work processes. It means the file management system. It means AI, and putting them all together, we hope will really give us an advantage that produces superior results for our clients.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody, the last day or two about AI, and on the case briefing side, it's got a long way to go, man. It just hallucinates too much. But on the other process spot, I mean, it's just dead on, man. Like like you said, looking at medical records, just boom. Yeah. And just think about, like, better than I do, but getting ready for a very complex trial, there's never enough time to get it all done, ever. I mean, there's always something more you can do, and it would take 2-3 weeks to get ready for the big trial and lots of bodies, but now you can compress all that stuff, and then you can do more, and you can just be better equipped to go try the case.
And think about it, if you started that compression 2.5 years ago, right? If you start that compression with intake, and you build out a robust research file with intake and a questionnaire that is, will ultimately comply with your standard of care reports from the beginning, and you can really start to work as deep as possible at every point of the case. I mean, you're talking about being ready to go by the time you file a complaint, right? And then your depositions are fully armed with all your graphics. You're moving downhill fast at the defense that really doesn't see what's coming at them yet. So, and I'm not naive. I'm sure they're using AI too, and they're going to try to figure out their ways to counter it. But I think that we are able to produce a much better case, right, for our clients, with our lawyers, with our people, using this technology. So it's something that we're definitely leaning all the way into.
Well, the advantage that the personal injury lawyers have over the defense lawyers is you don't bill by the hour. So you have an incentive to implement as much of that as you can versus some of these other folks. That's going to be really interesting to see on the defense side their business model is going to have to change. I mean, it's just going to have to.
Well, we'll talk about some worthwhile tort reform. You can start analyzing how defense billing methods really are an injustice to civil justice. Because you'll see a lot of times cases get drawn out, cases get protracted just because you can tell a defense attorney wants to bill a file. And you're right, we don't have that conflict of interest.
The other interesting piece, you're not going to deal with it. Well, maybe you do. I mean, you've got your clients and you make recommendations and you tell them this, that, and the other, and they come back to you, and it's clearly they've got questions that they've fed your recommendations into ChatGPT, and they've got this list of questions. Have you encountered that yet, where your client is questioning your strategy or your approach?
I haven't had that specific experience yet, but I'll take an engaged client any day of the week, right? With the cases we're dealing with the level of tragedy and injury that we deal with, it's better to have involved clients, involved families, right? So to the extent they would have be proactive and go out and run something through ChatGPT and bring it back to our office, we would welcome it. But no, I haven't seen it, at least explicitly, right? It very well might be going on behind the scenes and kind of brought to us, but it's something that I would love it to have a client that was that engaged and that taking that level of interest in their own case.
Have you gotten any clients yet that have said, "Hey, I found you through ChatGPT"?
We haven't, but we hope to, right? I think that's a big space of the future for sure. But to that point, we really are making an effort and a commitment to really dissecting our data and really understanding where cases are coming from. Right. So to the extent we do our own affirmative marketing, whether kind of behind the scenes, we want to know where stuff's coming from. Did it come from a former client? Did it come from a Google ad? Did it come from ChatGPT? So that's something we endeavor to identify in every case, just to make sure that we really truly know where our sourcing is coming from and what our revenue mix is.
So I want to switch back to sort of your leadership team, and you've hired sort of this high level, I'd call them non-lawyer leaders, and then your role has changed a little bit.
Yeah.
How do you manage that? And how do you interact with your team? Do you have weekly meetings? I'm curious about some of the tactics you've used as part of that transition. Both of it is a mindset that you can let it go, but also there's the piece where you're managing people. It's a completely different skill set. So how have you sort of learned to do that?
Again, by trial and error, and probably by breaking things on the fly and then figuring out how to put them back together and make a better, smoother system. I think I'd like to think I'm doing a better job of it now. I won't pretend that I haven't made mistakes in the past, right? It's a hard thing to learn on the fly, especially with the pressures of running a full caseload and taking over a law firm, and being able to kind of separate and give space for what needs to happen in that multi-level management build out is tough, right? And now I think it's exciting to see, because I think the system is finally working, right? I can see it working. I can see it. Massive things are happening, and I'm just finding out about it after the fact, right? And that's, while it's scary, it's also exactly what's supposed to be happening. Because if I'm intimately involved in every decision, then we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing. And so to learn how to do that, it took some acclimation. It really takes going back to finding the right people, right? You need people that kind of understand, you know, understand the culture of the firm that they're coming into, right? We are a front foot. Let's get after it. Today's the day. It's not a corporate mentality. We're not sitting around waiting to do stuff. We really want to attack the situation at all levels, whether it be HR, whether it be operations. So there is kind of a different expectation in a small plaintiff firm environment, and finding the right people that can not just adapt to that, but really take that on has been, I think we've done that. I think that the people we have in their seats right now are fantastic. And we're really starting to see the early days of that come to fruition.
So let's talk about that. So finding the right people, or I'll just call it hiring. What advice do you have maybe for those out there? How do you find the right people? What's your approach?
In the past couple iterations, my approach has simply been to, for the most part, follow the advice that has been given to me by our team, which is a completely different mindset than we've had in the past, right? Where admittedly, we've done some great hires. We've also missed on numerous occasions, right? And I feel very confident. I'll take the pretty out of it. I feel very confident in our most recent set of iterations of hirings. I think we've done incredibly well. That very well might be attributed to actually having a professional in-house HR professional who is just fantastic. She's done a great job, kind of, from crafting out the job descriptions to the responsibilities to doing the active recruiting, and then to really structuring the interview process. We're really kind of dialing in and bullseyeing some great candidates. So again, it's me getting out of the way. I think is a lot of the, and then of course, being there to take the responsibility at the end. But with that comes with all of the effort and all of the professional experience that goes into, putting two final candidates forward. Right? It's pretty easy then. You're talking to two brilliant people, and we sit down, we hash it out, and we've been getting it right.
Yeah, that getting out of the way, that's the hard part. I think that's what
it really is.
It's hard. Yeah.
Because for so long you convince yourself that that this wouldn't happen without me. We can't do, like, I need to do, and really you just need to get out of the way and trust your people.
I imagine it can be both ego deflating in the sense that, hey, they can do this without me, and maybe they did it better without me, but also incredible feeling, liberating if you're not around and all this stuff you go on vacation, you come back and all these things have happened and you're like, damn, that's awesome.
It certainly frees you up, right, to do the things that, I've mentioned it before, like finding what your highest value add is, right? I know that other people can do things much better than I can in, say, 90% of the professional space. There are certain things that I'm pretty darn good at, and now I get to focus on them. So that ultimately, reaps dividends for the firm at that level. So, and we're also blessed because, we've had enough success to be able to bring on these people, right? If we were strapped or if we were on a baseline, it'd be difficult to take that revenue and invest back in people. But for now, it's the clear decision for us.
So we sort of touched on it a little bit, but in terms of like what your role is now, do you do any legal work at all? Or is it?
I think that depends who you ask, right? No, I joke. I don't have any primary responsibility for files now. That really, you're talking about, is it hard to let go? That was probably the hardest thing. I grew up as a trial lawyer. This is what I came to this firm to do. It's what I went to law school to do. It's what, it's why I am here. I love doing it. I love holding the other side accountable for hurting my people, right? I think I'm pretty good at it. And I don't, but I don't have the bandwidth to stay that involved in a file right now. But again, thankfully, we have phenomenal people, right? I do have what we refer to as our catastrophic injury team, which has two other lawyers on it. So they have primary responsibility for the file. That team draws from practices across the firm. So we have cases of all different case types. The goal being is that our truly biggest cases, they have 4 or 5 lawyers working on them all the time. They never stop. They never stall. They're always working forward. So while I don't have primary responsibility, I kind of manage that team still. And, I look forward to the day of being able to get back to doing files on a more dedicated basis, but we'll see. We'll see if I get there.
So another question I have, again, we've talked about a lot of these investments that you're making, and you also mentioned you feel like you're, maybe a few years behind of where you would like to be. How do you balance, and I fall into this trap where I'm like, I see where I want to go, and I want to go as fast as I can, but sometimes you can go too fast, and the wheels are going to come off the car if you go too fast. How do you balance that, sort of trying to go into extra gear to get there faster versus, hold on, we got to make sure the foundation's solid before we go?
I think from experience, right? I mean, I can look back and see at least a couple specific examples of where my get fast at all cost mentality, didn't work for us, right? And that's when I say, in jest, we're 2 years behind where we should be. The process, there's no real textbook for what we're doing, for what you're doing, for what I'm doing, right? You get to see what works for other people, adopt what works for you. Maybe if you're really brilliant, you create something. I don't think I'm there. I think I'm pretty good at seeing smart things that other smart people have done and adopting what works for us, because I do think I know our business very well. And, having a more deliberative process, which is something we've put in place now. We have our weekly exec meetings. We have our quarterly leadership meetings. We have our annual global planning meetings. So we're not deciding stuff for today anymore, right? We're deciding stuff ahead of time. And I think, that a combination of a lot of stuff that we've already talked about, the people, the little bit of, we have some breathing room because of our success, the instituting a lot of the systems over the past few years. That's all kind of coalescing together and really helping us to be forward thinking as opposed to reactionary. So I think it gets a lot easier when you're planning ahead as opposed to trying to make decisions on the fly. I think a lot of my mistakes that I look back on were ones that I was making in real time, probably too much by myself than I should have, right? I should have been reliant. And now we've built to this point where that's not a problem anymore. And we're getting more and more confidence in our decisions, and it's being borne out in our results. So I think we're finally starting to see the systems work.
Yeah, I like that, the proactive versus reactive. So, it sounds, you've been at this for a while. It started from sort of, I'll call it the small firm. You're growing into a big firm, probably beyond that. As you sit here today and you look back, are there any lessons that you can point to, either maybe some things you're like, man, I wish I had not done that, or maybe I wish I had done that sooner? Is there anything you can point to?
It's been a real theme today, right? The delegation or letting go combined with having the right people. And I couldn't be more convinced of both of those at this point, right? I mean, it's hard early because you don't have the ability to do it yet, even if you want to. So there comes that time where you kind of make the decision, to your point, do I want a few extra dollars in my pocket, or do I want to start building something? And I think that is my answer to that question was, let's build something. Because I really do want to build the best catastrophic complex injury firm that I can, provide the absolute best results to our clients that we can. And, with that, the byproduct will make some money. But, really truly building a great system, a great team that does our job at the highest possible level is what I'm shooting for. And, so I probably would have started that a little earlier, right? Started really trying to delegate earlier, trying to build off legal skilled teams earlier. I think that the earlier you can do that, the more you're going to see results.
So another question, sort of look back as you reflect on where you are and where you've been. What's the best thing about entrepreneurship or running your law firm, and then maybe what's the worst thing?
For sure, the best thing for me right now is the flexibility, right? I have a young family. I'm really blessed that, with all the headaches and the inability to keep a normal schedule and the constant stuff coming up, right? I can do it with relative control from where I want to do it, when I want to do it, right? I'm not working 120-hour weeks anymore. I'm able to work. I'm able to see my kids off to school. I'm able to large part be there when they get home. And I find that more important than anything right now in this time for me. So, and being able to really build towards a vision I think is something that I'm enjoying right now. I'm looking 5-7 years down the road and trying to build with that in mind. And that's becoming fun for me. So that I'm enjoying both those factors, of course, above getting great results for our clients.
So maybe you have touched on this, but what is the vision? Where do you want to be in 7 years? Is it? I know you're located in Philly now, and you practice across the country. Are you thinking different offices, or what are you thinking?
Different offices, not necessarily, right? I mean, we've learned through COVID, through the subsequent kind of build out, that we can practice pretty much remotely from anywhere. We currently have cases in probably 25 states, so we're pretty comfortable. I mean, we're a Philadelphia firm. We're probably not going to change from that. We might open up a couple satellites here and there, but what I want and what we're looking for is to really maintain our culture, to really maintain our commitment to our clients and doing just the best work possible, while figuring out a way to do it, maximizing technology at the highest level that we can manage. I think that there is going to be a market wide, when I say market, I mean industry. Our legal profession on the plaintiff side is going to be really subjected to some significant changes. And we want to be ready to compete in that space and maintain our role with our clients and maintain our careers for our team with that kind of, I think there's going to be some aggregation. I think there's going to be some real financial controls that are brought into the industry. And whatever competition looks like, if it means actually, growing to address competition, or whether it means to be the most attractive partner out there. We don't know what that's going to take on yet, but my job is to make sure we're ready for whatever comes.
Yeah, got to be nimble for sure. So let me ask this: if you're spending a lot of time, you got a lot of energy, focus on your firm, you're also spending time with your family. Putting those two things aside, if you weren't doing any of that, what would you be doing?
Oh man, probably trying cases again. No joke. Fly fishing, coaching kids sports. I joke sometimes in the past, if I wasn't independently wealthy or a professional athlete, I'd love being a trial lawyer. And I mean that, this is something that I enjoy doing. I really do. I think that's why I've been able to do it the way I've done it, is that it's meaningful to me. I really do care about what it is that we do. I think what we do is incredibly important, and I'm really proud to be part of it.
So what are your sports teams? What's your sport? What's your teams? All the Philly teams or
all the Philly teams?
Baseball, football?
Baseball, football primarily. I'm a college football guy, Penn State. Obviously, big Phillies fan. Birds are doing well. So I'm pretty predictable when it comes to sports.
You think this is the year for Penn State?
Oh, man. I sure
It's a loaded question, man. Sorry to ask.
Yeah, it is. It's at the wrong time. I'll tell you in 2 weeks. How about that?
Yeah. I mean, you got a good coach, man, but he just can't quite get over the hump, man. He's almost there.
Seemingly. I think this is, if you're asking me, I'm going to be forever hopeful and optimist, and I think this is our year.
Awesome. That'll be fun.
I hope that ages well.
Okay, last question. So I'm an attorney out there, a younger attorney. Maybe I've started a firm or thinking about starting a firm. Any piece of advice or anything you give them as they embark on this journey?
If I look back at I was thinking about this in advance of today, and if I look back on what I went through to how I got here, it really is taking the time to do the grind, to really understand the nuances of what your business is, from every possible corner and role. Like you can't be a chef until you know how to make sausage. You can't run a firm until you know how to request medical records, right? You really do need to kind of toil in the details and become an expert at your craft before you can kind of move forward. I really do. I think I've been pretty good at helping to see what systems we need, build what systems, because I understand what it takes to do all of those different roles at a volume, right? And I understand how hard it is to get medical records. I understand how hard it can be to get a client on the phone to get them signed up, right? I understand how hard it is to get authorizations in and out, right? Just the things that most attorneys take for granted, I've spent years doing. And I think that really has benefited us as a whole. And if you're starting out, you got to do the work first.
I think that is incredible advice. It reminds me of a story. A friend of mine, his brother was an owner and, regional man, whatever, of a pretty big pet food chain. And he started at the bottom. He was one of the guys in the suit with the sign on the street, right?
Yeah.
And he would go in and tell people to do it, and they'd start complaining. He's like, look, I did that too. You're going to go do it. So it's sort of like, I've done everything I asked you to do, I've done before. So I think that's really good advice. Number one, you know how everything works together, but also you can say, hey, I've been there. You just got to do it. So great advice.
Exactly.
So Dan, this has been real fun, man. Thanks for coming on. For anybody out there who wants to find you, maybe refer you a case, or maybe see if you're hiring or whatever, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
We'd like to think we're always hiring talent. We take referrals as the highest compliment. Anybody that's interested can contact me directly. My email is just dan@mceldrewpurtell.com. And my personal cell phone is 215-527-6489. Call, text is probably better because it's, I can answer regardless of what I'm doing, and we can set up a time to call, and I'd love to hear from anybody.
Brave man, giving your cell phone out. Love it.
It's out there, so might as well keep it going.
Well, Dan, thanks again, man. Thanks for coming on. This has been helpful, and like, I really mean it. I think it's cool, some of the stuff you're doing. I know there are some people out there doing it, but it's, I'd say, fairly not common, some of the things that you're doing. So it's going to be fun to watch where you are in 5, 7, 10 years from now.
I'm excited too, and I really do mean it. I appreciate the platform you're creating here. I think the more we can learn and collaborate across our space in this sector, the better off we'll all be.
Awesome. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Appreciate your time.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Founding Partner Podcast. Be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts to stay up to date on the latest episodes. You can also connect with Jonathan on LinkedIn and check out the show notes with links to resources mentioned throughout our discussion by visiting www.lawfirmgc.com. We'll see you next time for more origin stories and insights from successful law firm founders.